Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A paediatric pathologist in Northern Ireland has resigned over interventions by Northern Ireland's Attorney General on abortion laws surrounding fatal fetal abnormality, a case where the baby would die. Dr. Caroline Gannon investigates the deaths of babies, including those in the womb or stillbirths. She said the final straw was having to advise a couple to use a picnic cooler bag to return their baby's remains to Northern Ireland following an abortion that they were made to have in England. The 1967 Abortion Act, which established legal abortion, has never applied in Northern Ireland. Abortion's only allowed in Northern Ireland in cases where the mother's life is at risk. Fatal fetal abnormalities, rape and incest are not circumstances in which abortions can be performed legally. Last year, a High Court judge ruled the ban on terminations in instances of sexual crime or fatal fetal abnormalities were incompatible with international human rights. But Attorney General John Larkin appealed against that ruling. Dr. Gannon said her position had been made untenable and that the interventions by Mr. Larkin had proved a tipping point. Well, joining us now from Belfast is Dr. Caroline Gannon, the former paediatric pathologist who's just resigned from her job. We appreciate you joining us. Can you try and explain a little bit better than I did the emotional trigger which really led to you feeling you had to step down?
I think you explained it very well. It has become increasingly difficult over the last 18 months. It's not just the termination ruling, it's also the stillbirth ruling, that we have a situation here where stillbirths can be reported to the coroner and an autopsy carried out by coronial legislation without any input from the parents. So an autopsy is carried out and the parents have no say in that. They have no say whether we can remove tissues for examination. They have no say when they get their baby's body back. So it's not just the termination ruling, it's also the stillbirth ruling. And over the last 18 months, I've become increasingly professionally compromised by these rulings, which have a big impact on the work I'm able to do for families.
Just explain to us the couple that came to see you that were not advised, they were not allowed to have their dangerously ill fetus terminated in Ireland. What happened there?
They had received a diagnosis of fatal fetal abnormalities and they wanted to go for a termination of pregnancy and they had to go to England for that. This was very much a wanted baby, it was a planned baby and they were very distressed that this would need to go ahead. They wanted to bring their baby home again, not just for a post-mortem, but also because they wanted a family burial. This was part of their family, this was their baby, and they didn't want to leave him in Northern Ireland. And it was only through the sheer luck that they were speaking to a very experienced midwife who knew me personally, and she put them in touch with me so I could give them information about how best to bring the body home and to preserve the tissue so that we could do a post-mortem and get all of the information that they would need. I'm sure there are other families out there who didn't access that information and had to leave their baby behind in England.
And just give us a sense, do you feel, and you work very closely with this, that abortion laws have become more rigorous in Northern Ireland in recent years?
Very much so. I started working in Northern Ireland as a consultant in 2003 and back then we did get some babies come into our department where the family had had an induction of labour because of a lethal abnormality. That seemed to stop completely in about 2008. So that we do seem to be going be more strict over the rules here, and I do feel it's interfering with family life quite significantly. I think parents should have a right to make a decision about their babies, and they're being denied that both in stillbirths and in babies where they opt to end the pregnancy early.
Because there was this ruling by a High Court judge in Belfast that it contravened some of the parts of the law contravened international human rights. Now, why didn't that go through?
There is no will in Stormont for that to go through. there seems to be very little public debate about the impact this is having on families at an individual family level. The impression I'm getting from the media is that this is being portrayed as an all or nothing situation, that either no terminations can be carried out, or if we say yes to terminations for lethal abnormalities, then that opens the door to every other type of termination of pregnancy. We're talking about termination of pregnancy in a very specific circumstance where the baby has an abnormality that's not compatible with life, and it's only a very small number of cases each year, and it's just that one particular scenario that we're looking at. This is not going to become abortion on demand, but that's the way it's being presented in the media, and that's the way that our MPs in Stormont are behaving.
Can you give us a sense, when you explained to the couple what they would have to do because they weren't allowed to have their baby terminated with you in Northern Ireland, what was their response to that?
I don't want to get into too many details because obviously this family deserve confidentiality, but the father seemed to deal with this by taking a step back and actually being quite detached about the whole thing. And I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure he was very distressed and very upset. And I have to say, the conversation, I mean, I deal with this every day. I deal with postmortems every day, but that was quite simply the most upsetting conversation I've had in 16 years as a consultant. To talk to a father about what size of picnic cooler we would need to estimate the size his baby might be, and to determine the size of the cooler, and to explain about keeping the tissues at 4 degrees Celsius so that we could preserve them the best we could for genetic testing when the baby got back to us in Northern Ireland. It really was quite appalling and quite surreal to have to discuss that. I just found it extremely difficult.
Caroline Gannon, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us here this evening.
Thank you.
Just to tell you, the Attorney General's office told the BBC today that the law on abortion is currently under consideration by the Court of Appeal.